Innovation is possible anywhere, right? Part of the reason for these presentations is to demonstrate that. Miguel has been a leader in that front, and we thank him for taking time and braving the traffic to join us this morning. Thanks again. All right, our next presentation is by our very own PK Agarwal. For those of you that haven't had an opportunity to hear PK speak before, he is both entertaining and enlightening, and a joy for me to present. PK gives a vivid description of the disruptions that lie ahead and how to succeed in this turbulent future. Technologies such as robotics, 3D printing, sharing economy, mobility, and especially big data, machine learning, cloud computing are fundamentally restructuring the nature of work. Therefore, the future of employment. Many job classes are likely to become extinct, while new occupations will emerge to fill the gap. 65% of children entering school today will work in job types that don't currently exist. Doomsayers fear that robots will make humans redundant. Others would argue that economic history tells us a different and positive story. The future looks very gloomy or very bright, depending on one's perspective and willingness to adapt and change. Please join me in welcoming PK Agarwal.
Good morning. Thank you, Russ. Great to be back home again for me. There's no time for jokes. I have a 12-minute timer that's going on, so so let's get started. I'm a dean and CEO of Northeastern, Silicon Valley. Most of you may not know Northeastern. So Northeastern is a very old Boston-based university, and we are expanding in the Bay Area to deal with the shortage of engineers and computer scientists. So that's what Northeastern is all about, top 50 research university. A little bit of plug for Northeastern. So I know many of you, all of you actually put on different hats at different times. But for the next 12 minutes, I want you to put the hat on of a change agent, which is what all of you I know you do, because your job's going to get a lot more interesting and a lot more challenging. That's kind of my basic pitch, thanks to technology and all the disruption that's going on. So let me kind of invoke Bill Gates. And Bill Gates talked about that we always tend to overestimate in the short run. That's the hype cycle, Gartner's hype cycle. But in the long run, we tend to underestimate. So I just wanted to give you this as a backdrop. So future is very disruptive. So here's a story. Somebody has come to us here in a time machine from 100 years ago, and they're asking us a question. So let me repeat. Somebody has come in a time machine. Time machine was invented in 1895, H.G. Wells. And so somebody used that time machine and come to us. And they are telling, look, I have come from 1916, 100 years ago, and here's my situation. There are 26 million horses in the US and 100 million people. I live in New York. New York is a very smelly place, thanks to all the horses. Even the machines are, run by horses. But we are starting to see horseless carriages and horses at the same time. But what's happened is that Ford has just produced their 1 millionth car last December. But let's give this person a name. Can we call him Mr. T? Maybe Mr. E.T. How's that? Mr. E.T. Let's call him Mr. E.T. So here's a Mr. E.T. sort of saying, and he's saying, look, I also seen these ads that are saying, you know what, we're going to get rid of horses, dispense with the horse. And we're going to replace this by this motor carriage. And in fact, if you read that, it talks about the new thing has no odor. Horses create a lot of odor, no vibration. And this is what I do. I am a driver. I drive carriages and pick up people for fare. And this is my cousin. He also does for private employment. You get it? So Mr. E.T. is telling you the story about 1915. So here's what he's saying. Look, here's 26 million horses, 100 million people, 1 million cars produced, and I'm worried about this car thing. What career advice, since we have the privilege of history of the last 100 years, what advice would you give me so I can go back and make the right choices? So think about this for a moment. So that's the dilemma. Now let me just say this, that we'll come back to this, the advice part, because we have the same challenge ourselves. We have 2016, and we have 1 million horses left, 320 million people, and we are testing driverless cars. So what advice would you give the cab driver? What advice would you give the truck driver? What advice would you give the bus driver? Because collectively in the US, these three professions account for 5 million jobs that are likely to get displaced in the next 10 years. So, you know, our job, Mr. E.T.'s job and our job is sort of sounds pretty similar. We don't know what the right answers are. And plus, it's not just about those three professions. You know, because of driverless cars, the car sales are going to go down, auto repair because accidents, you know, people cause accidents with people not causing accidents. It's going to be, you know, a lot fewer car repairs. Insurance changes. Who do we insure? Nobody knows to insure because less accidents. Healthcare changes because so much of healthcare is driven by accidents. And roads and bridges, the needs are different because driverless cars would be packed very tight with each other because they don't just see the car in front, they see 50 cars in front, so they can stop and move pretty quickly. So therefore, you have actually your 3-lane highway. If you take the carpool lane and make it driverless, it becomes a 5-lane highway. So all that starts to shift in parking lots. So naturally, you're talking about another 40 million jobs that are going to be impacted. Plus, all the same technologies that go into driverless cars are moving into other form of robotics. So here's an example of a Bay Area company that's renting security guards for apartment complexes for $6.25 an hour. So hold that thought. We'll come back to all these things. So Davos last February issued the report, and they said, well, gee, these robots are likely to cost by 2020 about 5 million jobs, and that's an underestimate. There are job families that are on the increase, particularly architecture, engineering, no surprises, computer and mathematical, management, sales, and there's many others that are the routine stuff that's declining. Most individual jobs, postmen, no surprise anybody. What are the top 10 skills? We're talking about complex problem solving, creative thinking, critical thinking. That's what you all do. And this is a very interesting survey, and I don't know if you can see it in the back, but let me just say this, that this is a future workforce strategies, a share of response, and basically it's saying that 65% of corporate executives in Davos said that they need to reskill people. And this, I know sometimes state government doesn't think in these terms, but I think it's not about reskilling state workforce only, but it's reskilling this 50 million people I just talked about. And state of California is going to have its own fair share of this thing in the next 10 years. So, I like this, frank and earnest. When you grow up, what do you want to be if the job still exists? You know, that because it may not exist. Now, this is coming home to IT also, those of you on the IT side. Particularly the next wave of IT is totally driven by big data, learning machines, data analytics. This is all leading up to AI, but this is the first step for the next 10 years. I would highly encourage the innovation lab to work with partner departments to pick up something. We'd be happy to help with that too. But that's the next wave. The waves, and these technologies come in waves, the mainframe, the mini computer, the PCs, the networks, the Internet of Documents, the Internet of Commerce, the Internet of People, now Internet of Things. And each wave is getting bigger and bigger and more disruptive. And this wave, particularly driven by big data, learning machines, and data analytics, is coming with all tools and technologies. I don't expect you to read that, but the mind-boggling, the evolution that's taking place, open ecosystems, machine intelligence, Internet of Things. And Internet of Things is the newest wave that, coupled with machine learning and big data and all that, is fundamentally so large. I mean, you're talking, we used to talk in billions of dollars of government expenditure. Now we're talking about trillions of dollars, literally smart cities, which we all talk about. So is this a problem or is this an opportunity? First and foremost, lifelong learning. I think that's the key because it's just the disruption is going to become faster and faster. I'm in the education business, so I tell people, hey, look, masters, tell your kids, master is the new bachelor's, bachelor's is the new high school. Here's the thing is that whenever you have disruptive change, what I'm talking about is not linear. You can't do more of the same. You have to jump to the next disruptive curve. And that's where the reskilling comes in. It's not about just what we call upskilling, where you just do a little bit better or learn a little bit more about that. You have to reskill. And so that's where your role as change agents comes along. How do you reskill yourself? How do you reskill those people you're trying to change? How do you reskill the society to deal with all this stuff? So let's go back to Mr. E.T. or Mr. T. We know that the wrong answer is to learn how to drive a car. This is our guest from 1915. Remember that, he's saying, what should I do? I see these cars coming. I know horses very well. I think in the range of right answers, learn how to repair cars. Or maybe start a gas station. See, it's fundamentally what I want to tell Mr. E.T., and I hope you would agree, that the future, you have to rethink what business you're in. If you think you're in the horse business, you're doomed. But if you think you're in the transportation business, maybe you start to think differently. And you can see it's not an easy challenge from being a coach driver to be an auto mechanic, but that is a challenge we're all going to face. That's the challenge that our stakeholders are going to face. So be a visionary. That's one of my messages. And being a visionary, when I worked for government, I had 22 years of government experience. I did get labeled as a visionary for a number of things I did do or didn't do oftentimes. But the key is this, is that what I find in technology is that if you just see what's happening in private sector, particularly in Silicon Valley, add 3 years and it's going to happen in government. Right? You all know that, and I think that should be the case, because government is not in the business of taking those big risks. So let the private sector, let the other sectors of economy, flesh it out, have all the craziness and companies going out of business, and then out of that comes the right things that are going to be permanent, and governments pick up on it. So I think it's in that context when I talk about machine learning, big data, data analytics, I mean, that's the future. So my parting thoughts are simply this, that there's a massive wave of disruption that's been happening, but it's going to get even faster and stronger. And the question you have to ask, several questions. As a change agent for my department, for my state, for my economy, can I be the change agent? Can I effectively reskill people to this new world? But more fundamentally, ask the question, what business am I in? Is that business takes me to the next wave and to the next wave, and can I keep reskilling myself? So thank you. And I have 1 minute left to go.
Okay.
But for the next person, sorry.
Oh, thank you. I think one of my most enjoyable parts about getting to participate as president of Public Sector Partners is the opportunity that I have on an ongoing basis to meet brilliant people. And PK is definitely one of them. If you get a chance, you need to have a conversation with him, because he's been where you are, and he can show you what is ahead. Tremendous. Thank you, PK.